It's good to have you back. It's good to see your face.
It's good to be back. It's been too long since we've been able to hop on live. I owe you a big debt of gratitude and appreciation for carrying the load the last couple months here when I've been mostly MIA as far as the JMA life is concerned. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you've been a little busy. You've got something going on that you've been pretty wrapped up in.
You know, I told my wife yesterday that, so it's Monday as we sit here and record this. Yesterday was the
Monday.
first day. Yes. I mean, there was a time there the last couple of months where even just what day it was would have taken me a minute to come up with the correct answer.
Right.
But I said, this is like the first day I've been able to just exhale and just have a day where I lay around and get caught up. I haven't had a Sunday where I wasn't in the studio for at least 12 hours for at least 6 weeks. So it's been a ride, but excited to be back at it.
Where do we start?
You're going to share an idiot moment.
Yeah, I did have an idiot.
That's all
moment,
our outline
Nathan.
says is share idiot moment. I'm here for it.
So,
I'm ready. How's my hair look?
Yeah,
I haven't had a.
Well, I have a hat on. That's why.
No, I know, but you got glorious hair. I always wear a hat. You got a glorious head of hair. You shouldn't cover that stuff up unless it's not washed. Okay. I'll just assume that you haven't showered, but
it's definitely washed.
That's great. Yeah.
Okay, my idiot moment. Moving on. So we have this thing in the United States during our holiday Thanksgiving on Friday. Thanksgiving falls on a Thursday, and Friday is a day called Black Friday. I think it's pretty much international for shopping. A lot of people will use Black Friday deals even internationally because you can get cheap discounts. But anyways, if you don't have Black Friday, it's kind of a marketing ploy for businesses to make a lot of money on a certain Friday. So I had been going through all my art websites and ordering places, Blick and Jerry's, and looking for art to order anything that's at a superb discount like canvas and stuff. And so I went to, there's a paint company called Gaffrey, and they're a small family owned, I believe, and they make really heavy body acrylics. And I'm a big heavy body acrylic guy, and I'm always looking for ones that are even thicker than the other ones I use. So I found Gaffrey through one of my past artists in my program, and went on their Black Friday sale. Was insane. So I loaded up my cart with a ton of paint at really steep discounts. Made a really big order. So pumped. Knew it'd probably be here in a week or two. And the order is delivered to the front of my house, to my doorstep. And I'm so pumped. I go out there and there's this tiny little box from Gaffrey sitting on my front porch that was delivered. And I'm thinking, well, that's odd. Must be in multiple shipments or whatever. And so I open up the box and let me show you everything that I ordered. It is one tube of 6-ounce light pink. I don't know what the hell happened, but this is all that came. And in the receipt in the box, I went, oh, well, let me check the order. It must be in 2 shipments. No, it was for one $6 tube of paint.
Nailed it.
I don't know what I did because I had a massive order. I had my mind fully prepped for what I was going to do with it, how I was going to play and mess around. I mean, it's sculptural acrylic. It's so thick. And so this is all I got. And with a great message, don't eat the paint. But I don't know what I did. I'm assuming what happened was everything that I ordered must have already been gone by the time the order went through because it was Black Friday and I was a little late in the day to remember to order it. I'm assuming that would happen, but it could probably just have been a moron move of, I don't know, canceling everything on purpose and then just ordering a 6-ounce. So anyways, that's a good fun art idiot moment.
Well, thank you for your vulnerability. I appreciate it.
I mean, hey, we've got to be vulnerable, right? I think we're going to talk about that a little bit today.
Today we're gonna share some stories, kind of a story of shared experience, IRL. That's how the kids say in real life, of which you and I have not had a tremendous amount of, as a matter of fact. But we're gonna share a story. We got a chance to spend the weekend together. I guess it's about almost exactly a month ago, right? Does that sound right? Not quite?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Wow, that was fast.
But yeah, it does not seem like that long ago. We're going to share that story and just specifically how it pertains to our practice as artists, as creatives. Why don't you kind of just set the table for your 50th weekend? Because it was quite the affair.
Yeah, my wife has been bugging me for the last year about what I'm going to do for my 50th birthday. What do you want to do? Do you want to travel? Do you want to go on a trip? I kept joking and saying, I want to go to space. I want to jump on Elon or Richard Branson's space thing and go into space, into orbit. And but I just couldn't figure it out because I mean, yeah, I want to do something, but I just didn't feel like really going, oh, let's do this and let's put a plan together. So post my birthday, my buddy Jeremy said, hey, what are we doing for your 50th? Like, you didn't do anything. We need to do something. And so I ended up putting together a little trip up to his family's property in the North Dallas area of some lifelong friends, and you got invited to that. And it basically was a now, and just a little context, like Nathan, you and I have known each other for 3 years now, I think,
Yeah,
or is it four?
right.
3 or 4 years, but all the other friends that I invited to join me have been lifelong friends, some for 30 years, some for 20 years. And so we all got together for the weekend up at my buddy's property.
Yeah. Yeah, it was funny because so y'all picked me up from the. You see how I picked that up when I was in Texas? Did that y'all
Yeah, there
sound
you
natural?
did. You got a
Yeah,
good
thank you,
y'all.
thank you. Yeah, so you guys picked me up at the airport. We went to get some lunch, and as we're sitting down and talking, it was you, me, Jeremy, and Jake. And Jeremy asked me how long we had known each other, and I said, well, by the time we get done eating lunch here, we will have spent more time in one another's presence than we ever had previously. We,
Yep.
we, we hung out that one time when I was down in your neck of the woods, but
Yeah.
compared to the 20 or 30 years of history you had with everybody else, it was a very, very different dynamic for sure.
Yeah.
It was funny because when you asked me, to join, I was honored and super excited to go. But I told my wife, hey, so Ty's having this 50th birthday party. It's going to be me and what were there, 8 people altogether?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
I said, it's going to be me, Ty, and 6 people I've never met before. And she goes, really? And I said, yeah. And she goes, and you're feeling good about going? And just for context, the reason that she would say that is because obviously knowing me as well as she does, she knows that I am not a big fan of being on other people's schedule, especially when I'm in a place where I can't just wander or walk away or do whatever. She
Yeah.
also knows I'm not a huge fan of, small talk and whatever. Just I don't have the patience for it as an introvert to just kind of like be around. And I'm not here to I like making new friends. I'm just not very good at it because I'm not that interested. Maybe a
Yeah.
good way of, that sounds terrible. There's probably a better way of saying that, but let's just go with that for now. I mean, she knows if we're at like a wedding reception, she knows that there's always going to be at least a 20-minute gap where I'm just MIA, just wandering around, the event facility, just not
Yeah.
being, with people, probably looking at my phone or something like that to
What?
just get a breath, get a break. So
Yeah.
when she heard I was going to be with, 6 people and you, at a compound for an entire weekend that was very rigidly scheduled, she's like, how are you feeling about this? I was like, we're going to do it. It's going to be great. And it actually was, but yeah.
Well, and tying that into that, this is going to be, we are going to have an art focus in this for everybody. So we are going to tie in all of our stories about this weekend into art things, and not just things that Nathan and I did
Right,
hanging
right.
out for really the longest first time we have in person, although we spend a lot of time on our phones and Zoom and FaceTime regularly.
Our
But
hope is a
part
takeaway
of
from
what,
this episode is not cool, guys. You hung out. Great. Thanks
yeah,
for sharing.
yeah. I mean, and there's such an importance. Like, I know we talked about this over the weekend, like just that importance of really feeling welcomed, because
Yeah.
here you are dropped in this new thing that nobody, you don't know what, you have no expectations. You don't know what's going on. Where are we going to be? Where am I going to be sleeping? What am I going to be eating? What's this like? Am I just out in the middle of a farm? Like, what's going on? There's all these things, but like that importance of feeling welcomed
Yeah.
is just such an important thing in life. And translating that to the art world, look, there's a great, that's a scary place when you don't know where you're going, what's happening, who you're going to be around, what you're going to do day in, day out. And you're just kind of going to go with the flow. And that's the art world. It's a
Yeah.
scary place. You
You bet.
don't know what to expect. We don't know what's out there. We don't know what's going on. And I think for any of you who are mature artists or who have been in the art world for a long time or have experienced the art world, I just want to add, please be very welcoming to younger artists or more inexperienced artists than yourselves, because you should remember how hard it has been for you to get where you are. And so just being welcoming with advice, with knowledge or wisdom to younger artists is just incredible. And man, when you see that new artist at an opening that you've never seen before, those new people or somebody that just keeps showing up, but is kind of standing against the wall. I can't tell you how incredible that feeling is when you feel welcomed into that circle or into that room or into that group of people. It can do wonders for somebody.
Absolutely.
There's a really great quote by the fabulous poet and author Maya Angelou, and she says, "People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." That's that's powerful. That's a pretty beautiful quote, because you know what? I remember every single person that treated me like shit, that used me, that abused me, right?
Right.
They're on a specific level.
Yeah.
But I also, man, I have true, really formed emotional bonds to the people that just made me feel incredible and welcomed and appreciated.
And it's pretty easy. It doesn't take that much to make somebody feel welcome, to make somebody feel
Mm-mm.
special. And considering that wherever any of us might be at, someone, if not a whole pile of folks, threw down the ladder at some point
Yeah.
to help, to
Yeah.
make us feel welcome, to give us a piece of advice. I don't need to get into the story for today's purposes, but I'm dealing with a challenge I've never encountered before,
Yeah.
and I had a chance to reach out to some folks that I was connected to from Clubhouse back when that was a thing around the COVID times, and just those connections and friendships that were made and that continue, and just reach out for, hey, need some help with this. Has anyone encountered this before? And getting multiple responses, from folks pointing me in the right direction, and helping, the way that they were able to, is just huge.
Yeah.
It's just having those, but again, point being, it doesn't take much to respond. It doesn't take much to make people feel welcome. It's actually pretty easy.
Well, and just a reminder, we've talked about this at length in our episodes. Your network is so vital and massive for you in the art world. You have
Yep.
to have a network, and you need to
Right.
be constantly building your network and expanding that network. And so,
Yeah.
what a better way to do that than by being a very welcoming person, a very appreciative person, a person who always says thanks, who always greets, who always is willing to give advice and show up, right?
Yeah.
Not just be there for yourself, but to be there for the community and be there for everybody else as well first, and then
Yeah.
let everything else fall into place after.
And I think you think about what it takes to really, make connections with people, getting to our topic for today. But when we are willing to be vulnerable, when we're willing to just put ourselves
Yeah.
out there and ask for help, that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
You may have your antenna up and recognize that artist who's over in the corner by themselves because they've got some paint on their shoes and look like they're uncomfortable,
Yeah.
but you may not. So it may be incumbent upon us, that person, to get out of our comfort zone, go up and say hello, be vulnerable enough to say, hey, I don't know anybody here.
Yeah.
What's your story? Right. And that's,
Yeah.
I would say you're more extroverted. So and having now been with you in social situations, you're much better at this than I am. It's not in my wheelhouse. Like it actually is really uncomfortable for me to do that.
Yeah.
Not because I'm not confident in conversation or whatever, but it's just not my default. Right.
Yeah.
I'm not out in the world trying to make new friends. I have to think about it. I have to actually work at it. And so vulnerability really does create connections. And when we have those connections with just one, back to the networking idea, just
Mm-hmm.
one person in the group, that connection extends to everybody else in the group. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what got me thinking about sharing the story from the weekend for the podcast here, is like, back to the story when I told Nikki about the weekend. I said, look, I don't know anyone else, but I know Ty, and I know that he's the type of person that if they're still in his life at this point, at 50 years old,
It likes to kick, stretch, and kick. I'm 50 years old.
when you've known them for 20, 30 years, if they're cool with Ty, they're going to be cool with me. Right. And I just trusted on that and showed up. But that shared connection, it just bridges the gap. It makes new bonds easier to form because you have that sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? You've been vetted.
Sure.
In a way.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that, of course, I'm assuming too, like their trust of me being, whatever, worth being there was an extension of their trust in you as well.
Yeah. I hear this. I hear two things from artists on a regular basis. And I spend a lot of time talking with a lot of artists and
Yeah.
networking and having these conversations. And number one is I'm so afraid to go to openings because I am
Mm.
introverted
Yeah.
and I'm afraid of having to talk. But I
Hmm.
know I need the network. So I'm going and I'm just standing on the wall
Yeah.
and I'm just watching.
Right.
Right. So that's number one. The second story is from the artists who are consistent in that going, I just made the three best friends I've ever had
Yeah.
as an artist.
Hmm.
And we're meeting every week and we're doing studio visits and we're going to coffee and we're having drinks and we're talking
Yeah.
art.
Yeah.
Those are the two things I hear from artists more than anything. Number one, I'm afraid. I'm really, really afraid to go. But I'm going because I need something. I need
Right.
other artists in my life. I just get what I don't even know. I need to learn. I need my nephew to teach me to hand gestures on my phone so that I don't get the pop-up gifts all the time.
Is that your phone or is that our little
It's my
Riverside
phone. I just
platform
had
here? Okay.
balloons. Yeah. But those are the two main things. I'm
Well, hold on.
afraid.
Just a great reminder that
Yeah.
if you're just listening to us and you want to see what we look like when we talk for whatever reason, we do post these videos
Yes.
on YouTube as
Spotify and
well.
YouTube. Yep.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah, Spotify as well.
Yeah. So and that's just going back to be welcoming.
Yeah.
If you keep seeing a face and there's never anybody around them, what if they're the next big art star? What if
Yeah.
they've got this fantastic studio? What if they want to share a studio with you? They've got room. I mean, the things are endless, right? It's artists. We all have the same thoughts, ideas, things in our head all the time. So it may be your next best art friend standing there that's just afraid to be the first person to say hi or do
Right.
something. So engage people and be vulnerable, right? Like you said, vulnerability creates connection. Be vulnerable and just go, hey, what's up? See you here all the time. You
Yeah.
must be an artist or an art
Yep.
lover or a
Right.
starving collector. Who knows? You don't know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But
Any
so
go.
yeah, I did just a few weeks ago. I did 2 studio visits locally with 2 artist friends, newer artist friends over the last few years. My friend Jack Bauer, who is a local artist in Waco from San Francisco. He was at the Art Institute San Francisco. He was around with a lot of those abstract artists that were in San Francisco in the 60s.
Oh, cool.
Wonderful stories. But we did a studio visit, looked at his sculptures, looked at his paintings at his studio here in Waco. And it was just such a beautiful time, just being vulnerable, discussing work. Hey, what do you think, Ty, about this stuff? What direction do you think I should go in? And just having those discussions of what's working, what's not working, and just
Yeah.
being really vulnerable. And Jack and I we're doing a trade. So I'm trading for one of his wall sculpture pieces of painting. So he'll be at the studio this Thursday as we kind of go through and look at work and hang out. And then my friend Stacy Warrinks, who's an artist here in Waco, but just seeing her space and studio and talking art. And those are just 2 people that I randomly met, one through Instagram who was moving to Waco and
Yeah.
reached out and said, hey, I'm moving. I've followed you for a while. Would you be willing to hang out when I get into town?
Yeah.
I'm always like, yeah, absolutely. Let's meet up. And then Jack, we met, we were both in a show at our small museum here in a group show. And he had
Very
a couple
cool.
sculpture pieces. And then we met at the show and hung out and talked. And we've hung out a few times. So that's being open and welcoming. And then it creates just valuable connections that can last a short time or that can last a very long time.
Yep. He must have had some cool stories about saving the world multiple times. Also,
Many.
yeah, little 24 reference for the.
That's a 24 reference.
That was Sutherland's character's name, wasn't it, in that show?
Yep.
Bauer?
Jack Bauer.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of a bunch of examples as well. I was at an art. Oh, what is it called? Art crawl. There it was a few months back, and actually ran into a couple people that listened to the podcast and had recognized me. And recently, I had a studio visit with one of them, who's now a mentee of yours, Hallie, and she brought, gosh, maybe 5 or I think there were maybe 6 of them all together, and had a lovely studio visit, great conversation. It's just fun, right? It's fun to make those connections. And it's fun to have conversations about art with other artists. It's just cool,
Yeah,
right? So
absolutely.
the more of those we can have, the better. Yeah.
For me, as an artist, vulnerability is something that, we've talked about in multiple episodes. There's just a depth. There's a depth that I really try to focus on in my work that's based on memory. And part of memory, there's a lot of vulnerability to share things that are very hard to share, that maybe you don't want to share just on a microphone. And so you share
Right.
it through your work or on Instagram,
Yep.
whatever. And so part of something that I love to do with my friends is I'm somebody, if you know me, I like to go deep. If you've been mentee in my program, I like to go deep. I like to get to the heart of the individual, the heart of their life, the thing that drives them or the thing that upsets them and those things. And so one of the things that we did one of the evenings together after we sat around and ate in the barn, we started talking about, I phrased two questions, and they were, what was something that was extremely beautiful in your life this past year? And what was something that was really difficult for you in this last year? And the group of us, this is a group of men. This is something that I preface with, as men, we really struggle with vulnerability and getting deep, especially the older we get. And so I really wanted to give an opportunity for us to just go really deep as a group of men and just talk about life. And I think something that happens in that can also happen with our art is when you do go deep and you are very vulnerable, you're opening up the audience to also reflect on the depth of what you're asking or what you're saying and cause them to really go back and think about those things deeply. And I think there's something very special in those moments as human beings to really get to the heart of another, really get to the soul of another and go really deep. There's something meaningful that lasts. It's not something temporary.
Right.
This is something that lasts, right? And there were a lot of tears. There's a lot of laughter. Like there was some real deep emotional things happening as we shared those moments
Yeah.
from our lives over the last year. And I think it brings an instant connection to the group. It brings an instant like depth of, oh, if you're willing to go deep, then I'm willing to go deep. And I think
Right.
that's something as artists that we should really be thinking about in our studios with our work too. And I know we've talked about that in a lot of episodes, but I think it's something to continually bring up and discuss many times because it should be the heart of our work.
Yeah. And there's a component of intentionality around that for
Yeah.
you to have thought about those questions in advance. A lot of those things come up organically anyway, sometimes, but
Mm-hmm.
because you were intentional about considering, all right, what are the deep questions that I want to get into with this group? When we ask deep questions, we're way more likely to get deep answers. And that applies to interpersonal
Yeah.
relationships. It also, of course, applies to our work. So the type of questions that we're asking to others and to ourselves as it pertains to the work is absolutely going to determine the depth of answer that we get. And frankly, that is going to lead to a more interesting and engaging answer, a more interesting and engaging conversation. Again, whether it's between two people or between our work and anyone who might be looking at it.
Well, I think this is a great comparison, right? Of humanity and art. Like, what do we want more than anything as an artist? We want a true connection with the audience.
Mm-hmm.
We want the audience to see our work, feel something,
Right.
want something, walk away with something, continue to think about that piece, maybe take the chance and buy it because they love it so much, right? One of my good artist friends, Audrey Chaw, we were talking this last weekend, and she bought two pieces at an opening the other night. And it's a financial sacrifice,
Mm-hmm.
but she loved those pieces so much. They hit her so hard. She could not leave without them. Like literally couldn't leave without them. So she took the financial risk and she bought the works.
Yeah.
That's what we as artists like dream of, those moments. But what is the complete comparison of that is we as humans also want those moments with other human beings.
Yeah.
We want to leave impressions that last. We want to feel that reciprocal love from another human being back to us because of
Mm-hmm.
how we are or how we act or how we respond to them. And I think we should compare those things, right? In the studios, what do we really want as human beings with ourselves and our lives, but also what do we really want with our work? And I think that radical vulnerability and that welcoming spirit and those things should go hand in hand with our work. And I love this quote from Van Gogh. He says, I feel that there's nothing more truly artistic than to love people.
Hmm.
And I think that does go back and forth with your work too.
Yeah.
If you're really putting that same attention and love into your work, something's going to happen. Something is going to happen with the audience.
Well, and that vulnerability is such a cheat code when it comes to accelerating the connection just exponentially in real time.
Yeah.
You think about the difference between surface level small talk. What have we really learned? I mean, apart from that, the other person also speaks the same language as us and is doing good and lives over here and has a job over there or whatever it might be. That the cheat code that is vulnerability, it really does accelerate those connections so quickly. I mean, I think about, probably the most extreme example is, for me, has been my experience with recovery and with the 12 steps. I have
Yeah.
had intensely intimate connections with people who I had never met before, and in some cases never met again. If I'm
Mm.
traveling out of town, I go to a
Yeah.
meeting, whatever it might be. But because we have that shared experience, because in this case, my life depends on my willingness. And I learned that early on. Like, if I'm not willing to really share what's really going on right now, I have no chance at staying sober. And
Mm.
when we go first, right, the shared connection, that common bond that we have, whether it's, what I was just discussing, or whether it's, our path as artists, that's a very specific thing.
Yeah.
A non-artist is never going to be able to relate to certain challenges, certain feelings, certain
Sure.
experiences, like somebody who is also in this crazy game of art, like not even
Yeah.
close. Right.
Right.
And so being willing to share, like, hey, I'm dealing with this. Have you ever experienced that? The takeaway I think here is just going first, leading with,
Yeah.
like, hey, and being okay with not looking cool, being okay with, like, not looking good, and with betraying the fact that you might not know what you're doing is kind of a
Yeah.
necessary component to that, right? Because if we
Yep.
lead with sort of this contrived air of, like, I got it all going on, I got it all figured out, when of course, we don't, it's not going to get us anywhere. There's nowhere to go from, like, hey, I got it all,
Yeah.
I'm good, right? There's nowhere to go from there. If that's what I start with, you're like, cool, good for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and that's that human connection.
Right.
That's the most important thing in art and networking as an artist, is
Yeah.
having those human connections. So many books talk about the artist who is still sitting in their garage making art 50 years later.
Mm-hmm.
They've never gone out and made human connections outside of the studio. And there may be a Van Gogh, there may be a Helen Frankenthaler that the world will never see.
Right.
Right. Because they were too afraid or had too much fear in front of them to actually go form some of those human connections that
Yeah.
can actually get their work and their career out there. And man, and that's the thing today. We have Instagram today. That's a great way to start forming some of those connections. Reach out, say hi, talk to artists, comment on their work regularly. I mean, it's the tool. I
Yeah.
was reading today in a book this morning that Magnus, what's his last, Magnus, right? What Resch,
Resch.
Magnus Resch's
Mm-hmm.
book, and he was talking about, he was watching big gallery owners after meeting with other artists.
Yeah.
And the first thing they did when that artist walked away was get on their Instagram page and look.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that connection. Like, the first thing that some of the biggest gallery owners were doing was getting on Instagram right after they talk to an artist or meet an artist and just looking at their feed.
Yeah.
So we have this connection that we can use to connect with other artists, especially, and I talked about this with some friends this weekend, when you're in a really small town.
Yeah.
When you're not in an art city. When you're not in New York, you're not in LA, you're not in Chicago or Paris or Berlin, right? Or London. You're not in the major art cities, and there just aren't a lot of artists around. You're going to have to figure out a way to meet some.
Right.
If you want to build that connection and build that network. And Instagram's a fabulous place to start. Just say hi.
Certainly. I mean, for all its limitations, for how impersonal
Right.
it can absolutely be and feel, for sure, at times, much like we were talking about before, with the intentionality around, asking deep questions to get deep answers, it requires some intentionality to get a personal connection out of
Yeah.
an inherently impersonal platform, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't take much, but it does take,
Right.
an effort of some kind, and it is crazy. I mean, how just the amount of real connections and real friendships that can be made, without ever meeting somebody in person. I think
Yeah.
about, I'll start a funny example. I'm going to be, in Munich for, my show next month. And I was thinking about how I'm going to potentially, deal with any issues that might come up as far as having access to a studio space, the tools that I normally use, but just a place, to work. And my Instagram friend, Nico Hensel, I knew he was in Germany somewhere. I didn't realize he's like 45 minutes away, from the gallery. So he reached out. I think we've never met in person, but we've
Yeah.
dialogued a ton, just with DMs and commenting on one another's work and just kind of being mutual fans of what one another does. And he was so generous to say, "Hey, whatever you need, you tell me, you come up, I'll empty out my space. It's not as big as yours." He was so funny. It's not as big as yours. I don't have any flamethrowers, but but you're welcome to use, whatever I have. And like, that's amazing. It's amazing that, somebody who is willing to do that. But that all comes from, just making those connections and keeping conversations, initiating and keeping conversations going. That is the nice thing about Instagram, is that we are going to, if we spend, back to intentionality, the right amount of time and a specific, whatever that looks like. But as we're following one another, we're going to keep, probably, hopefully, popping up on one another's feeds and being aware of what other people are doing, which naturally keeps the conversation going as well.
Yeah. I mean, I did that residency I did earlier this year
Mm-hmm.
with 7 artists who met on Instagram and then were a part of my program. And if it wasn't for just that digital connection
Right.
and the willingness to reach out and then stay connected, and now there's, 7 of my best friends, like literally 7 of my closest artist friends. And we meet every 2 weeks on Zoom and we chat and we, have a WhatsApp group that we're constantly going back and forth on, but we've become brothers and sisters. Like when I say that, I don't take that lightly. Like we literally have become brothers and sisters, and there's a depth of vulnerability when we chat now.
Right.
That shared connection was the beginning.
Right.
But then the boldness to be vulnerable with each other and having a shared experience together for a month has created such a radical depth and a willingness to just lay it out there when we need to.
Right.
And just be totally honest.
Yeah.
And, and usually the answers are like, "Oh my gosh, me too. Thanks for, I'm there too."
Right.
Or, "Oh man, I was there last month. This is what I did to get through it." Or, I don't know. It's just created a beautiful, beautiful thing. And just, but if it wasn't for people just reaching out and starting a conversation to begin with and taking a risk, then it wouldn't have happened.
How many of that group had you met in person previously? Anybody?
1, Gianna.
Just Gianna. Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's wild. I mean, I'm laughing about, you pick me up at the airport, get out, give you a big hug, and I had that moment where, as we're pulling my bag, towards the car, I'm just like, "There you are.
Hey,
you're a real life person."
That was pretty funny. We both did that. Look at you.
Yeah. You're about, I mean, as many hours as we spent, talking and even interfacing, via video like this, it's still a different thing, a deeper level of connection, of course.
Yeah.
When we're sharing oxygen and belly to belly,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, let's jump into vulnerability, since we've been talking about it quite a bit here. Talking about that vulnerability that I was able to create with those other 7 artists, definitely extends beyond the personal relationships.
Yeah.
Into our professional and our creative endeavors and our art. Like I said, like that depth of just being vulnerable and telling each other stories and getting to know each other outside of art has brought an even bigger depth into our work and when we're making it and talking about it. And there's that trust factor, which is really tough at times for an artist to have a trust factor with, "Hey, will you look at this work I'm doing?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, will you tell me what you think?" Because at the end of the day, we're going to do what we think, period. But inviting you, or you inviting Eric and I, right, like you did throughout your whole process creating work for the Munich show, was like, "Hey guys, just been working on this one. What do you think?" And having us coming back and talked about there's a trust factor there.
For sure.
You're showing unfinished work. You're showing direction before it's been really worked out in your head, just to get some feedback. And that really adds to the depth of everything else. And there's a great quote by the actor Val Luchendu that says, "An artist is vulnerable and their craft truthful when he or she resists the desire to meddle with the wholesome expression of the soul. I'm going to read it one more time.
Hit it again.
An artist is vulnerable and their craft truthful when he or she resists the desire to meddle with the wholesome expression of the soul.
I love that. I love a lot about that quote. The part that really jumps off the page to me about that is the desire to meddle. You're resisting the desire to meddle with the wholesome expression of the soul, because it implies, and I agree with this, that we have an inherent resistance to vulnerability, which makes sense because by definition, we are exposing ourselves to potential criticism, rejection, fill in the blank with however you want to end that, but things that we have from birth been programmed to avoid, specifically avoid, right? You think about the conditioning that we get as kids in school and trying to fit in and trying to avoid rejection and how deep those imprints really are, right? So let's get a little vulnerable here, Ty, and talk about, like, what do you think for you? What is it? I'll go first. I just talked about going first. I'll go first. But what keeps me from being vulnerable as a human being and in my work is just fear of being exposed. Not looking good, not looking cool. I was not a cool kid. I mean, back to talking about grade school, talking about growing up, definitely was not a cool kid. Was an outsider. Didn't feel like I fit in. Probably, I think I'm seeing, let me imagine it. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of heads nodding here. It's not just me. Okay. So I think that imprint is still there, while I have worked to, get over myself and get over that, like, need to, like, feel like I'm all put together, to kill the perfectionism that prevents authentic expression. But that's it for me. That is number one with a bullet. The thing that the desire to meddle with that wholesome and authentic expression for me is just the fear of not looking good, the fear of exposing the fact that I don't know what the hell I'm doing. What is it for you?
Man, I mean, this quote goes, if you haven't listened to the last episode, go listen to the last episode, because I read a section from Letters to a Young Poet by Rainier Maria Rilke. And this is really kind of the heart of what I read, because the poet who is writing Rilke letters and asking for advice is meddling with the wholesome expression of his soul. He's completely meddling, and Rilke is calling him out on that and saying, stop looking outside, stop messing with your soul, dive into the deep moments, quit looking around and asking all these questions outside of yourself. Like, stay focused on you. And I think for me, I'm such a perfectionist with my work that I think I get really scared to put something out there that I don't feel 100% is right.
Yep.
And so I really struggle with that big. And sometimes that stops me from getting started.
Yeah.
Because I don't have the idea fully flushed out in my head yet. And so I really start to kind of meddle with things rather than just going, hey, I know what I'm feeling. Let's go ahead and go. Let myself take me where it goes. Instead, I plan, I prep, I plan. And then I wait, and then I wait, and then I wait, and then I start. And I think, I probably only share 25% or less of what I make. I think I would say probably, as I went back through things like to the public, I hold a lot back from Instagram, from YouTube, from things like that. And I started to think about that the other day, because I think it might've been Gianna or somebody that had said, oh my gosh, I love these pieces. No, when she was here at my studio a few months ago. And there were some pieces that I was like, yeah, I don't know if I'll, and she's like, oh, what, are you kidding me? I love these.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know, and she's somebody I 100% trust her eye. Literally, I'm like, if you say it, I believe you.
Yeah.
She's just somebody I have that trust factor with. And I think I sat back and I'm like, why am I so afraid to put that out?
Yeah.
What is it? Well, is it because it's just not in line with where I'm trying to go right now? Is it, what, but there's a fear there with me. And I think it's because maybe I'm not feeling like it's perfect, which art's never going to be perfect. It can't be. It's not going to be. And I actually love non-perfect art, but there's something with me that really wants it to be, in my eye, so comfortable, so perfect before I let it out the door, that I think at times it really holds me back.
Do you think that that fear comes from the work not being good or true to what you're trying to say? Or is it more a product of fear of how it's going to be received or viewed within the context of what you've done previously?
Yes. And yeah, I'd say
Sure.
yes to both of those,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a
When
whole
I think,
that's a whole
when
nother
I look,
conversation that we could have an entirely,
absolutely.
standalone podcast about. But it is. I mean, and we've talked about it in different ways previously as well. I'm sure we'll get into it again. But just that whole idea of when we're getting into new territory, when
Yeah.
we're expanding beyond where we've done before, where we've been before, rather, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be less certain because it doesn't look like the things that I mean, as we're making work that's in the same vein of something that we've done before and looks enough like other work that we deemed to be successful, it's much easier to arrive at the conclusion of, yes, this too is good and authentic to me. And here you go, world. But it does get back. I mean, your story with Gianna is a great example of it. It does get back to that. I think, what was that Helen Frankenthaler quote where I think we played it in our Helen episode, but where she said, once I'm done, I'm always, this is a very rough paraphrasing here, but what I took from it was, I'm always surprised. I never know what the galleries are going to want or what people are going to like. And that's really
Yep.
none of my business. I
Yep.
was sharing with a friend recently that of the work that I've spent the last, 4 or 5 months, 6 months making for this upcoming show, 85% of it didn't get finished or shared with the gallery. And of that, a much, much smaller percent was selected, to be
Yeah.
included.
Yep.
That's just part
Always.
of it. And always. And I remember there was one or a couple in particular where I was like, no, you really, are you sure about no?
Yeah. Wait.
No, that
Every
one. I'm like,
time.
really? That one? I
That's the
almost didn't
one. What
share that
about
with
these
you.
three? Yeah.
I almost
Yep.
didn't I almost didn't include that in the list of options, so it's just, it's funny how that all works. It's just a really interesting dynamic.
Well, and the funny thing too with me is we have this little note that says the courage to show imperfection in our notes here. And the funny thing is my work is imperfect. Like, I'm not trying to make perfect looking work, right? I'm not a realist painter. I'm not a figurative painter. I'm an expressionist, so it's everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so the funny thing is I celebrate the imperfection of gesture and the imperfection of things in the piece.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
mentally, right? If it doesn't feel perfect, it's hard for me to let it go and move in my head. And the funny thing is the ones that usually I'm so confident in that is it, I nailed it, it's perfect, are not the ones ever selected.
Yeah.
Like you said, those ones that you're just like, nailed it, fuck yeah, let's go. And then the gallery's like, these 4, but not those 4. And you're like, wait, those are my 4 favorite pieces. Those are the ones that worked.
You beat me
So
to the
it's
F
an interesting
today.
thing. And that is, we need to do an episode on that.
We do. I think it'd be really interesting. You beat me to the F today. You got to drop the F bomb today. It's kind of a little game that, ladies and gentlemen, that we all play. That Ty and I play is who gets to cuss first, and we try to keep it to 1 or fewer
to minimum
for the kids. It's a family show. Yeah. So on imperfection, there's a quote by Guillermo del Toro that popped up for me. Very simple, but just an absolutely amazing quote. There is beauty and humility in imperfection. There is beauty and humility in imperfection. And what I love about that quote specifically, the beauty part is to me, I think to us, pretty obvious because it is a huge part of what both you and I are attracted to in work and seeking to communicate with our work. The humility part of that is also really interesting because, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this as well, but I was really thinking about this, and it does require a level of I'm trying to think of another word. I mean, it requires a level of willingness to be okay with, I don't have it all figured out. It's not going to be perfect. If a working definition in the context of this quote is, it's not going to be perfect, and I wouldn't want it to be, even if it could be, there's humility in acknowledging that perfection isn't even on the table. It's not even a possibility. And being okay with that reality opens us up that much more to be vulnerable, to be authentic, and to have that imperfection lead to beauty.
Yeah. Well, I want to say something, just a context of what I was saying previously
It's a
about being a
podcast. This is a place
yeah,
where we say things. Go
this is
for
where
it.
we do that.
Yeah.
Just love it. uh, just talking about struggling with being a perfectionist and wanting, the work to be a certain way. In no way am I talking about this quote, because I truly believe there's beauty in humility and imperfection. When I say letting something go, it has to feel right for me to let go.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying, just to not confuse anybody with what I said previously in this quote, because I totally believe there's beauty in humility and imperfection. And there has to be,
Right.
because we're all imperfect. Every
Yeah.
single one of us is imperfect. We all have flaws. We all have things that we've struggled with before, after. We've been broken by people in multiple ways our entire lives, or currently in our life today. And so there has to be beauty in that, because we know what's on the other side. We know how it's formed us and how it's created our trajectory and where we're going, these imperfections. And there is beauty in it, because there's beauty in healing, and there's beauty in refinement. There's beauty in overcoming the mistakes or overcoming trauma in life. And there's also humility in that, because if you've been through something, you have to have a form of humility in your life, especially towards others, as this whole episode's kind of geared towards human connection and vulnerability and being welcoming to people and things. You better have humility where you are. No matter where if you're the most successful artist on the planet, you better show some humility, because you struggled. You've missed the mark. You've had imperfect things go out into the world. You've messed up. You've been broken. And there's nothing that pisses me off more than people who do not live in humility, that have gotten somewhere through tough things and have achieved more than others. There's nothing that drives me more crazy than those individuals in life. So just operate with beauty and humility, because you've been through it. You've gone somewhere. Welcome the young artists. Give advice. Don't ignore every comment on your Instagram page from young artists that are asking you questions. Why can't you share what you use? Why can artists not share, this is the material I'm using to get that? What's with that? Show some fucking humility. Honestly, it drives me crazy. I see artists who have massive followings that are looked up to. And I'm not talking about the big artists who don't run their Instagram pages anymore. I'm talking about artists that have built a big following, that are doing things. They've got all these comments coming through from artists asking questions, and they never respond once.
Yeah.
It just pisses me off. I don't understand it. Give something back, damn it. I don't know, it just drives me crazy. Anyways,
why don't you read our yes.
Let's go to the next quote by the fabulous Georgia O'Keeffe. This is incredible. I've been absolutely terrified every moment of my life, and I've never let it keep me from doing a single thing I wanted to. Hell yes. Georgia. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a pretty freaking great. That's a badass quote.
It's a badass quote. I mean, it's supposed to be scary.
Yeah.
I mean,
absolutely.
The fact that you're scared is an indication that you're trying to do something real, that you're trying to do something big.
Yep.
You think about the only time that fear wouldn't be, or an element of it wouldn't be, at least an ingredient in the mix, maybe small, maybe large, is if we were doing something that we had done before the way we had done it before. Yeah. I mean, perfection for sure requires precision. It requires repetition of the same thing. And there isn't a lot of fear in that because it's just rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
I mean, anything that actually does qualify under the definition of perfection, it is very precise. It's very specific. It is exactly the way it was intended to be. And while there is certainly room for perfection, while there's certainly there's certainly things that we would like to work that way, we prefer for the engines in our vehicles or whatever to work the way that they're supposed to. There's precision in that, but it's not interesting. It's the same
Yeah.
working version of a million others that are exactly like it. And polished perfection isn't interesting. It's not unique. There's nothing authentic about it. It's just another one of those things. And,
Yeah.
who cares? So that's kind of the takeaway of that for me is like, and again, back to one of our core talking points again and again and again. That's why we go back to these quotes of the greats like O'Keefe, and we hear her say, I've been absolutely terrified every moment of my life. Awesome. Me
Yeah.
too. And I've never let it keep. That's the difference.
Yep.
So starting from a place of, all right, we're all terrified. We're all scared. We're all going to experience a version of those emotions. Great. The difference between people that do it and don't it's just doing it in spite of that fact. It's not getting
Yeah.
over that fact. It's not, the goal is not to get to a point where we don't experience the fear anymore, because that's probably not possible anyway. The goal is to get to a point where we acknowledge that we are absolutely terrified and we boldly move forward anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and my buddy Stephen Pressfield says in The War of Art, he talks about how if you have a massive fear about starting something, it's probably because you're supposed to start it.
Yeah, that's how you know.
That's how you know. When you're scared shitless, it's time to start it. It's time to go, move that direction, do it.
So as we begin to wrap up, let's read a quote by Brené Brown that I think really kind of encapsulates most of what we've been talking about so far. She writes, staying vulnerable is a risk we have to take if we want to experience connection. Staying vulnerable is a risk we have to take if we want to experience connection. Your thoughts?
You're not going to experience connection if you're not. Because, and we're not talking vulnerable as far as let me share my life story and everything I've been through right off the bat, right?
Right.
No,
Right.
Sometimes vulnerability is literally just like, hey, see you here all the time. I'm Ty.
Yeah.
Are you an artist? You just here to see art? I mean, that's for some people, that is radically vulnerable, right?
Sure.
For you,
yeah.
right? To just sit at a table with a bunch of guys you don't know. And then all of a sudden, oh, it's my turn to answer the question about what's the most beautiful thing in this. Oh, crap. You know what I mean? That's very vulnerable.
Yeah.
But even simple vulnerability is just saying hello or just
Mm-hmm.
acknowledging someone's presence, and what happens when you take that first step.
Yeah.
Connection begins.
Yeah.
And that's also translated into our work, right? What is art? Art is a shared connection. Art is a shared connection. It is something between the creator and the viewer. It is something between the audience and the maker. If you're in the room or not in the room as the maker, it's still a shared connection. You've created something, you've been vulnerable enough to let it go outside of your studio and go on a wall for somebody to witness. That's a shared connection. So that's vulnerability as well. Just being able to get your work out there is a vulnerable act as an artist. But if you want to experience shared connection with other artists, you're going to have to take some steps in vulnerability to meet some people as well.
Absolutely.
Nick Cave is somebody that we talk about a lot. He's somebody that you and I both love as an artist, a creator, and a musician. Just fabulous. And he's somebody that absolutely embraces vulnerability on every level, on every single level, as a human being, as an artist, as a writer, as a musician, and a creator. And so we've shared this quote before, but I would love to share it one more time. It's something I go back to on a regular basis as I've kind of gone through his book, Faith, Hope, and Carnage, and have paraphrased it and taken all the quotes and put them into a notebook of mine from the book. And so here's the quote. Here's what he says on vulnerability. There's something about being open and vulnerable that is conversely very powerful, maybe even transformative. For me, vulnerability is essential to spiritual and creative growth, whereas being invulnerable means being shut down, rigid, and small. My experience of creating music and writing songs is finding enormous strength through vulnerability. You're being open to whatever happens, including failure and shame. There's certainly a vulnerability to that and an incredible freedom. He just said there's an incredible freedom even in failure and shame.
Yeah.
And I think that goes right back up to the Georgia O'Keeffe quote. I've been terrified every moment of my life, and I've never let it keep me from doing a single thing I wanted to. Because sometimes the things we want to do, there's some failure that's going to exist when we're doing what we want to do. Because you got to fail until you hit the winner, until you hit that one that is the one that all the failure and the shame produced. And that shame he's talking about is the album that just didn't sell better than the last album.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? Or the song that didn't hit as good as some of the other songs. As a creator and an artist, there's a shame. When I've had shows that haven't sold a single piece. I feel immense shame when I take that show down and not one work sold.
Right.
Like I really do. But I go back to what Stephen Pressfield said when his first screenplay bombed, King Kong Lives. And he was so like, why am I doing it? Blah, blah, blah. You know, this is terrible. This is so shameful. And his buddy goes, but would you change anything in your life to not do this at all? And he's like, no, I want to do this. He goes, yeah, you're in it. You just failed. You just had a real failure. You're in it. Right. Yeah. So I have to look at those moments and go, well, I just had a solo show. I'm in it. And then walk away and go, okay, how do I improve on that? You know?
I mean, and there's such a deep level of acceptance that's baked into both of those last couple quotes that we shared by O'Keeffe, by Nick Cave. And the acceptance is that it might not work. It's just an acknowledgement of like, yeah, people might not like it. People might not buy them. People might not. I mean, it's just baked into the equation. And without that acceptance of it might not work, and if it doesn't, I'm still going to be okay. If it doesn't, it still will have moved me in a positive direction. If it doesn't, I still am on the path of getting closer to making my best work. And that Nick Cave quote, I mean, that's the incredible freedom that we're all after, I think.
Yeah.
Certainly what I'm here for.
Yep.
That incredible freedom that comes from being open to whatever happens, to receiving these ideas and executing them and doing our best today. We don't need to know the answers for tomorrow. We just need to know, all right, I'm acting on what's true for me in this moment because I'm receiving what's coming, because I'm open, because I'm vulnerable, because I'm listening to what's real, not what I think should be there. I'm listening to what's we're receiving what's actually here, not trying to sort of contrive what we wish was or what we've done before. And that is an incredible freedom. That is, I think, what this whole art deal is all about, right? It is that incredible freedom. It is that and it all comes from that openness and from that vulnerability. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
So next steps, go to some shows, say hello to some artists, go make some new friends, go be vulnerable, meet some people. And I hope you're having an awesome time in the studio this week. And we got a new year coming up pretty fast. So I'm pretty excited for what's happening for you and I coming up in 2025. And there's a lot of things that we don't know that are on the horizon. So be vulnerable. Don't let fear hold you back. Set some goals for 2025. Where do you want your art to go? Where do you want it to be? Who do you want to meet? Go after it.
The end.
The end.
Bye.
Bye.